I found you! All mine!
Well, we ain't topping that, so I'm sure y'all will be able to handle the remainder of this list no problem at all.
Yeah, you ever notice how we have to sometimes justify how this franchise is meant to be a kid's show? Oh, not so much because of the over-the-top action that at least very occasionally draws some of the red stuff, but more because it's kind of terrifying. I mean, a little violence, pff, that ain't gonna affect anyone, or at least not give them trauma. Yeah, don't even pretend like some of the stuff in this franchise didn't give you at least a few night terrors. Whether it just be a little jump scare, or even just the very premise of a certain character or plot point, there was likely something that stuck with you for a while that made you question why you even bothered buying that candy plushie when the Space Bunny and his machinations wouldn't feel out of place.
Thus, to celebrate the month of October, we thought it would be only appropriate to make a top 10 list of some of the scariest things in the Precure franchise.
It doesn't have to be a specific moment or scene, just some sort of plot element that kept us late up at night. We will keep it to one entry per series, otherwise, and let's face it, certain seasons will end up dominating this list. Though we will at least bring up a few honorable mentions for some of these series, because again, some shows have way too much to choose from.
Thus, let's see if we can't dig up some old trauma as we take a look at the top 10 Precure nightmare fuels.
Number 10, Shell's Breakdown from Kira Precure a la mode. Yeah, on paper, this season where they knowingly removed all of the hand-to-hand combat and placed more focus on the slice of life aspect might not sound all that chilling, and yeah, this is at the bottom of the list for a reason, but like a lot of things with this show, I think I've kind of warmed up to it.
Seriously, we have actually been considering giving this series a second look and maybe make a whole video out of it, so perhaps look forward to it, we'll see.
Because to its credit, scenes like this were effective amongst all the so bad it's good stuff. Good god, I actually really want to talk about that bonkers finale now. But yeah, as a bit of a refresher, this took place right after Julio's original purification back into Picario. As his elder twin, Shiel felt ashamed that she had become so caught up in her own success that she neglected her brother's jealousy and eventual falling into despair. As a result, she became an easy target for Noir and Q the Dead-Eyed Rem. Hopefully she doesn't have her mace on hand. But seriously, this was an effective and gradual breakdown again in the kids show over a couple of episodes. It is unnerving to see this once cheerful genius Pasture lose all of her passion for her craft and eventually become besties with Yuno Gasai. Obviously, they quickly snapped her out of it thanks to Best Boys Waffles, but that doesn't take away from this scene. It is at the bottom of this nightmare fuel list for the simple reason that it's more sad than it is scary. I mean, sure, those emotions are kind of correlated with each other, but as creepy as Shell's dead eyes were, they were legit overused in the show, as we even saw Ichika with them just 6 episodes back. Still, a legit well done scene that, while not prioritizing the emotion of fear, was at least a nice break from all of the diabetes-inducing sweetness. That actually might be a little scarier. Number 9, The Secret of the Grand Ocean from Tropical Rouge Precure.
I'm not going to complain about them underusing this plotline again, okay? Maybe just a little. Ow.
But yeah, again, it's a little surprising that this particular show, with one of the more benign setups, managed to make it onto this list. I mean, in TRP's case, it was a show mostly built on just pure slapstick. Hell, they even kind of introduced the premise with a joke back in the anthology episode. And yet, actually seeing it play out was kind of disturbing. Alright, so after seemingly winning the day and saving the Grand Ocean, the Precure quickly learned that they were in fact in a simulation.
You know, one that does involve turning people into batteries, like, how would that even work?
This would be kind of off-putting if this was just another machination of the villains of the show, but no, the thing that puts it on this list was the reveal that they did make this machine, and in fact it even had a mind-blower function that wasn't being used by Rick Sanchez, but rather the big lady in charge. Yep, the Mermaid Queen was a totalitarian bitch who, while her intentions were not fundamentally outright malicious, were still very morally gray, and ultimately still were a betrayal of everything the Precure stood for in trying to bring everyone together.
And to anyone who wants to argue that the Queen did nothing wrong by preventing her people from feeling the pain of loss due to their long lives, it's always wrong to steal other people's memories, as it is what shapes us into the people we are.
We lose them, we lose ourselves. I don't want my pain taken away, I need my pain.
And yet, this lady never mustered up a single crap and just said that it was all for the greater good. This makes my list for the fact that it was legit shocking that it was coming from this show that, again, just a few episodes back, did a silly little anthology that was written like a total Reddit post. Now, all of a sudden, we were dealing with untrusty authority figures who callously were messing with the minds of their citizens. And yeah, while it didn't really go anywhere until like the very end of the show, it was still very different for this franchise, and did at least give a sense that not everyone could be trusted. And yeah, while I can't rank it any higher due to it not being outright scary, it was still an effective premise that reminds us that Ariel is always watching you. Number 8. Notika's reinfection from Healing Good Precure. Yeah, this one's a lot easier to describe, as it's mostly just this one quick sequence, but damn if it's not well put together. After an otherwise rather pedestrian outing, the episode took a dark twist when Darizen decided to have his own Don Kuroto moment, but actually played straight this time.
Seriously, between his ad-libbed overacting and the show's opening playing in the background, this was pretty much destined to become one of Kamen Rider's biggest memes ever.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I still really like this sequence because Kuroto is God, but it would have been nice if we could actually have seen it play out with the intensity it deserved, like... that. Yeah, just the suddenness of it all really helped to sell the scene. That combined with Notika's established past ailments that we would learn were in fact from the evil sentient virus of the show, again hi Xaid, really helped to sell the urgency of the situation. It was just a simple yet very effective moment that also acted as a good turning point for the series. Nothing really much else to say, except that maybe the scene would have been a little more surprising if this character had been voiced by Aoyuki, aka the queen of suffering magical girls. FYI, yes, I am looking forward to see more of it very soon. Number 7. The Death of the Dark Seeds from Futaiwa Precure. Honorable mention for this series could probably just go to some of the designs of the Zakenna. Seriously, some of the designs of these one-off monsters were just wicked in all the right ways. That said, their defeats of them turning into some non-threatening little gnats kinda devalued those great designs. The Dark Seeds, though, well, after betraying their king and turning into Fusion's daddy mom, their subsequent fate at the hands of said king were a little more disturbing. First of all, just their combined form was kind of creepy in the sense that they looked like a jacked up mannequin, but then as soon as the king found an opening, he slowly started to absorb them from the head down, with us even seeing them headless at one point. From there, he just had to swallow what remained like a big Tylenol, resulting in...
that.
Needless to say, this whole sequence had some of the best animation in the whole show, which, on top of turning it into a bit of a JoJo anime, Pillar Man thickness and all, also led to a lot more detail in the Dark Seed's disfigurement and some needlessly well-drawn silhouettes of their final moments of existence. Juna's expression in particular looked really creepy, as I think he broke his jaw just to get that scream, which, you know, he may as well, as his very existence was being erased. This whole sequence, or at least most of it, was done by Tatsuo Yamada, who really needs to come back to this franchise, if only so that we can get more creepy, Lovecraftian moments like this. For providing us with one of the more off-putting deaths in the entire franchise, complete with imagery that I'm sure made some viewers regret asking for an extension to this season, this definitely earns a spot on this list. Number 6. The villains from Deluxe 2, which, yeah, we'll count this as the one movie crossover entry for this list, and again, nothing really much needs to be said here. I mean, okay, this whole sequence starts off creepy enough just by the fact that Northa from Fresh was leading the charge, and yeah, don't worry, her series entry is on the way. But then it only got more and more insane, as not only did the other resurrected villains start to pop out of the giant water droplet like those CGI abominations for the live action Little Mermaid, with some just being freaking heads, the big bad of the film, Bottom, started to speak through Northa, and I honestly can't decide who has a creepier voice, Misa Watanabe or Kiyoyuki Yanada, so why are you making me listen to both of them? From there, the villainess started to twist in some very unnatural ways, and the rest of the baddies just decided to join in, all the while the happy little Disneyland knockoff was being destroyed as they laughed maniacally. This whole sequence, we can confirm, was entirely animated by Naotoshi Shida, who, unlike Yamada, did at least contribute recently to this franchise, including this amazing sequence from the Hero Guard Sky opening. But, my dude, could you calm down a little? I mean, you are the absolute master of tracking shots and detailed character designs and deserve all the flowers, but that doesn't mean you have to throw everything in, just saying. Yeah, needless to say, this is quite the shocking sequence, so why isn't it in my top 5?
Well, for one thing, the top entries are a little more subtly horrifying, with a little more setup, rather than being literally in your face like this.
Don't get me wrong, it still hits almost all the right notes in terms of being off-putting, mostly through North Bottom going absolutely ham. But by that same token, it is very over the top, and thus kind of circles around back to being not that scary. Not to mention, nowadays, I kind of more admire the legit technical achievements of sequences like this, rather than be shocked by them. Sure, I might have ranked this a little higher if I had seen it for the first time, but now that I've seen it a few times, as well as really thought about the implications of the top entries, it doesn't have quite the same punch. Still a great sequence that would probably take the top spot in terms of pure spectacle, but otherwise, it's kind of like the Flying Dutchman of this list. Number 5. The Birth and Death of Princess Twilight. Obviously, the transformations of the other generals into their monster forms could also be considered honorable mentions. Well, except for maybe Shut, that was just adorable. That said, can we all just agree that this was one of the darkest plot lines in all of Precure? Like, I'm usually not a fan of brainwashing, as it is often just a means of excusing a villain's past transgressions, and more importantly, fails to highlight the horrific process involving completely altering someone's personality. And yeah, this show, for the most part, avoids all of those issues. I mean, first of all, Toa was kidnapped while she was still very young, and over the course of likely close to a decade, had her original memories erased, all the while being raised by her kidnapper to eventually become a herald in her war against all hope. Like, that scenario in of itself more than earned a spot on this list, as other than the initial mind wipe, this is a rather realistic depiction of forcing a free mind to conform to the warped ideals of their manipulator, and yet it only got worse. As apparently, a daughter who believed that Mommy Dearest was always right still had a little too much autonomy. So, after Twilight found a perfume, Despair tricked her into using a corrupt key that turned her into a mindless slave and essentially erased her very personality. The tale of this dark princess is both horrific and yet also kind of tragic in that while Toa certainly was not this monster's daughter, Twilight was, in the sense that she brought that personality into existence and raised her for several years. And yet, the very second she showed the slightest sign of weakness, Despair had already made plans to kill her and replace her with just an avatar of herself.
Now I guess it only figures that the embodiment of Despair would be a Karen.
But yeah, while the after effects on Toa were quite horrifying as well, her dark persona really ended up embodying despair in more ways than one. Number 4. The Birth of King Jikochu. From the machinations of one big bad to the next, and while the King of Selfishness was far more sympathetic than the Queen of Despair, it didn't make his rise to power any less horrifying, and in fact, if anything, it made it even worse. Having already lost his queen in childbirth, the king was on the verge of losing his last of kin in his daughter Ange to an unidentifiable illness. One of the sacred treasures of his kingdom did hold all the answers to her ailments, but that same treasure was holding back an eldritch abomination that, appropriately enough, was what had gotten Ange sick in the first place. Thus, the king was left with a difficult choice of saving his daughter or letting his kingdom fall. And in the end, he of course gave into his ultimately selfish desires. By the way, mad praise should go to the director and storyboarder Takao Iwai and Yuriko Kado, as this whole scene was almost Shakespearean, with the king cursing out God for taking both his wife and daughter, before a bolt of lightning showed his literal dark side. It then wisely left it ambiguous whether or not the Pro-Jikochu influenced the king to give in to his desires. Personally, I lean more towards it being entirely his choice, with the overwhelming stress and despair he was feeling driving him into madness. It makes the scene all the more chilling, showing how desperation can even drive a truly righteous king into becoming an outright tyrant. As such, the Pro-Jikochu just decided to give him a more appropriate appearance.
Now, we were actually debating on whether or not to put this or the previous entry as the 4th place position on this list, as they are both handling some pretty dark subject matter. But then we remembered, for a Nightmare Fuel list, you also have to work on your imagery.
I mean, it would have been enough if the Pro-Jikochu had absorbed him and then took on the form of the kaiju-sized demon we had seen in previous episodes. However, I guess they decided to just take it a step further by having the black mud go inside of the king, putting him through some agonizing pain that led to him breaking through a glass door where he would fall off a tall balcony into the water below, all the while screaming in pain. From there, he would emerge from the water with his biggest, and I mean biggest, shout. Jesus! Really? What else needs to be said here? Other than maybe every desire comes at a price, some steeper than others. So, we finally reached the Yes Precure 5 entry of this list, and while we certainly have a few choices, like again some of the Monster of the Week designs, or a few scenes from the first movie, I think we all know what needs to go here. Those masks. That said, and while we could certainly just include all of the Precure 5's masking scenes from episode 23 as one entry on this list, I personally want to pinpoint one Cure scene in particular. And while I have heard some find Aurora scene that we even used as the buffer for this countdown to be the scariest, personally, I gotta go with this one. Hey, did you know that the original Annabelle doll that the Conjuring films featured was actually a Raggedy Ann doll? And while I understand that they couldn't reproduce it for their movies, for copyright reasons obviously, I do think that smaller rag dolls are more frightening than whatever this is.
I mean, yeah, I know that's rich coming from someone like me, considering the company I keep, and I even have like a plushie corner in my room. But at the same time, I will admit, I'm a weirdo who kind of ironically likes weird stuff like this.
And two, more human-like dolls like Komachi's Mini-Me's are a lot more unsettling in my opinion, as they end up falling into the uncanny valley with just enough similarities to the original that we can see them as the shadow to the true self, which was a running thing with all of the Cure sequences here, and yet it was also just off enough that they look like little demons, especially with those beady little eyes. And on top of that, them swarming her like termites devouring some wood, and their eyes becoming a ghastly shade of yellow, and yeah, the oversized plushie is looking a lot less scary now, isn't she? And yeah, let's not forget that these things were also trying to convince the studious Komachi to just give up on all of her responsibilities and clear her mind, make it an empty void where she could just lay around and have fun adventures with all of her little dolls.
Come play with us. Forever and ever and ever.
Ah, Fresh Precure, the season that had nothing but fun times like dancing, Kaoru-chan, depressing dystopias where freedom of thought had been completely extinguished. Wait, what? Yeah, obviously, just the very setting of Labyrinth gives us a plethora of choices for this entry. After all, East was a tragic and terrifying product of such a horrible Skynet-run world, and her gradual breakdown and eventual quote-unquote death arc could have made this list, but really, I think the moment that solidified this season as being a slightly darker series, at least for me, actually came much earlier, and from a much more unexpected source.
ねえお母さん
Yeah, I'm not kidding. My face was like this for a good while after I saw this episode originally.
Like, good sweet Jesus Christ, that's dark. An entire city's worth of martyrs were not killed per se, but rather literally erased from existence, which in a way is even worse. I mean, at least with Thanos, the person could get in one last melodramatic and memeable speech, while this was instantaneous and out of nowhere.
And that's the main thing here. This is legit another really shocking moment, as aside from previews of this episode, they only really included some very subtle foreshadowing hinting at this twist.
It was certainly there, especially upon rewatch, but in an otherwise regular episode featuring a particularly goofy-looking Nakewameke, you wouldn't expect it to have technically one of the biggest body counts in the franchise. I mean, of course it was undone by the end of the episode, but for a brief moment, the Clovertown street was completely devoid of half of their parental figures. And said figures didn't even see it coming or feel anything. Just a sudden wall of nothingness with likely no passing on to an afterlife if it exists. That, to me at least, is a fate far worse than death, and legit something that keeps me up at night. So, in every sense of the term, this is easily one of the most powerful nightmare fuels that this quaint little magical girl franchise has ever produced. Like again, good sweet Jesus. And before we get to our number 1, how about a quick recap? Number 10, Kitchen Nightmares. Number 9, Under the Sealizer. Number 8, way too topical for 2020. Number 7, Starscream's Final Moments. Number 6,
Out of this house! Out of this house!
Number 5, No Friendship, No Magic. Number 4, The Embodiment of Avarice. Number 3,
My name is Talkie Tina, and I'm beginning to hate you.
Number 2, Really? This asshole got a redemption arc? And our number 1 nightmare fuel in all of Precure comes from truly one of the most frightening of all sources.
Okay, seriously, what does this show have to offer?
I mean, I know how we opened this video, but that was mostly just a joke. Or what, that one time that they all had creepy eyes? Pfft, we already basically covered that with the 3rd place spot.
I mean, come on, what could take the top spot on a list like this? Oh, right. Him.
I mean, really, what more needs to be said other than that Joker wasn't so much involved in a nightmare fuel, in that he is the nightmare fuel. Like, every second this literal clown is on screen is just unnerving. And why exactly is that? Well, let's count down the ways. 1, he's a clown. 2, he was an effective manipulator who could constantly gaslight his cohorts into becoming more aggressive to the point that they would kamikaze themselves. 3, he's a damn clown. 4, he has one of the more impressive lists of victories over the Precure. Sure, they were almost undone, but he still managed to literally bring them down to their knees and almost defeat them each time.
5, and most importantly, he is a goddamn clown.
Now, if we were to narrow things down to just one scene with this guy, then maybe we could go with his first direct battle with the Precure, which, yeah, had some terrifying faces, not just from him, but our titular superheroines too. Like, seriously, I know Chiaki Kon occasionally works on this franchise, but I'm pretty sure she didn't work on this episode, so why did everyone go full on Higurashi? It was genuinely a frightening scene, not just for the visuals, but also because the Precure couldn't really retort anything he said. He had soundly defeated them with absolutely no issue, so what hope did they have against the big bad Piero when they couldn't even scratch his dragon? Just seeing one of the more positive teams in the franchise literally named the Smile Team fall into despair was just unnerving.
That said, so was almost any other scene this guy was in.
Seriously, we could just about easily put any scene of him creepily talking to his friends and enemies and it could take the top spot. Everything, even down to his final moments, were just the stuff of pure nightmares. If you ever needed proof of why Billy is so afraid of clowns, just look at this guy and you'll understand why Joker from Smile Precure is the ultimate walking nightmare fuel of this franchise.
Thank you for watching, and here's hoping we didn't cause any long-term psychological damage.
Honestly, this was a really fun list to put together that has gotten me a little bit more into the Halloween spirit. And as such, I think we'll at least try to make a couple more themed videos before the month is up. In fact, looking at the top spot of this list, maybe next time, we should dig a little deeper into the Clown of Despair with a villain spotlight.
I suppose look forward to it. And until next time though, farewell for now my friends, and... Did someone tell the villains a funny joke again? Oh great, I'm gonna have to listen to this for the next few hours.